Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Mill Spouse Transition Conversation. I am Anna Larson, a military spouse transition expert, and your host for today's show. Hey, veteran spouses, let's be real. Career transition isn't just about updating your resume or applying for a job. It's really about figuring out who you are after years of adapting to everyone else's schedule, priorities, and all of those military moves. It's also about breaking past the frustration of being overqualified but overlooked, experienced but underpaid. And most of all, it's about finally having the support to take control of your own career path. Today, my guest is Rachelle Chapman. She is the powerhouse behind It's My Turn, which is a free career transition program designed just from veteran military spouses. It is one of a kind. It is the only thing out there that's like that. Now, if you've been wondering where to start, how to open new doors, and what it really takes to build a meaningful career after military life, this conversation is exactly what you need. Rachelle is a business strategy leader with 20 years of experience driving workforce development for underrepresented groups, corporate stewardship, and relationship management strategies. She is the director of the Adecco Group US Foundation, a vigorous advocate for military families, acting as an author, speaker, and sought out as a subject matter expert. Hi, Rachelle. Hi, Anna. It's so good to see you here today.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been so excited about this.
What led you to be so focused on career and career transition and all that stuff that goes along with being a veteran military spouse?
So I am a veteran military spouse. My husband, Russ, separated or retired rather from the Navy 2.5 years ago. So we are officially part of the veteran and veteran military spouse community. He actually joined the Navy about 2 months after 9/11. So he was one of those stories of people who watched those towers fall on 9/11, was in banking and said, you know what? There is something else that I need and want to do with my life. Joined the Navy 2 months later. So
Wow. From banking to military service, that's not a story you hear every day.
no, definitely not necessarily in his 20-year career plan or life plan, but really turned out to be such a wonderful experience for us and as a married couple, for him as a career professional, and to a large extent for our kids too. We had a really great career in the Navy. And I do say one of the things that I love so much about my husband is every time he got promoted or every time anything great would happen to him, he always said, it happened to us. Look what we did, which I loved because it was his way of recognizing and acknowledging that we talk about it a lot, but the service really and the sacrifice that we make or made as a family. We had a great journey and adventure as an active duty military family. And now we're entering chapter 2.
Yes. And chapter 2 is where your part starts to now ramp up and become very exciting in a different way. So tell us a little bit about that transition and what you took from that.
I already mentioned as a family and as a military spouse, we really did love our time on active duty. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, there were times that I questioned whether or not we could continue doing this. But overall, the net experience was wonderfully positive, great growth opportunities for us as family. We got to live in places and meet people that we would have never met had he not raised his hand and volunteered to serve back in 2001. So extraordinarily grateful personally for the experience. I had no idea. I think a lot of military spouses feel this way. I had no idea really what I was getting into. And so great learning curve for 20 years. Transitioning over to professionally, how being an active duty military spouse and subsequent veteran military spouse impacted me. I'm a little bit of a unicorn as Anna in that I have worked for the same company, the Adecco Group, for 20 years. In fact, interesting fact, this week, I celebrate my unofficial 20-year anniversary at the Adecco Group. The reason it's unofficial is because 20 years ago, I followed my then military boyfriend, now husband, to Washington, D.C. We had met. I really wanted to live in New York City. He said, I can't get orders to New York City. The closest I can get is D.C. Would you come and let's give this a go and see if this relationship is something, which it was already. But So I said yes. He promised to get me to New York City, which we did as often as we could. That's a separate conversation. Anyway, I really wanted to work on Capitol Hill. I said, if I ever moved to DC, that's the business and the industry or area that I wanted to pursue. And I had been an intern in college. I did all of these things that I thought made me qualified, yet I couldn't get an interview to save my life. And so while I was waiting to get a phone call back, he said, hey, I worked for a staffing company in college. You're looking for kind of a temporary situation. Why don't you go explore that? And so I pulled out a phone book. This was 2005. I'm brand new to the city. I'm brand new to DC. And alphabetically, the first name in the phone book was Adecco. And so that is how I chose my future employer, alphabetically. And oh, by the way, the office was located in a really cute part of the city. And so I was like, oh, that's a great street. Not informed whatsoever. I don't recommend that to veteran military spouses as being a way you choose a potential future employer. The trick was I never, ever anticipated that this was really going to be an employer that I would work for 1 year, let alone 20 years. They hired me on the spot to be a recruiter, which I didn't know anything about 20 years ago. I'd come from pharmaceutical sales, and I was considered an in-house temporary worker. And so not until you become a full-time colleague do they celebrate your official anniversary. Very long way of saying, unofficially, I'm a 20-year veteran of the Adecco Group. In August, I will be a legitimate 20-year veteran of the Adecco Group. Over the 20-year period that I have worked here, I have taken on so many different opportunities and roles. And once I became an official colleague 5 months or so into my employment with the organization, I learned a big lesson that I have shared with military spouses over the years. And that is, at that time, our organization decided to bring the government relations team in-house. We had been contracting that work out, and our CEO said, no, we want to set up shop inside the company. And so the person that was leading that vision needed an executive assistant. And I thought, I went to graduate school. I traveled around the world. I was a little bit too big of myself at that point and thought that's not the job I was really seeking. And the reason I share the story is because in my mind, it was a giant step backwards. But what it was, or what it turned out to be, was a giant step forward for me in my career. Because what he did, he was retired 06 in the Army. And so he loved that and at this point was engaged and we were getting ready to be married, loved that I was married to a service member. Just as a quick side, he really brought me alongside of him. I was very honest at the beginning and said, look, this is not really what I went to school for or what I want to do. But if this is an opportunity or a way for me to learn this business and how you do the work of government relations, then I would be very interested in taking this role. So my first lesson to military spouses in my own experience is ask for what you want. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't know what we want, and that's a different conversation, but don't be shy. Give yourself permission to ask for what you want. I can't even remember how old I was. In my late 20s at that point, I asked for what I wanted. And he said, okay, I got you. And he did. He brought me under his wing. So sometimes an underemployment, I know, is a big issue. Obviously, I've been working in this space for 20 years, so I understand that very much. And I felt that was me at the time. But what that opportunity did was it fed my curiosity. I'm a very curious person. It gave me a lot of exposure to senior leadership, to a new world, a new way of thinking, a new way of doing business. That was very important to me early on. Between performing with high expectations and performing well in that role or very early on, 20 years ago, and being curious, having exposure to the right people in our organization. And when he was let go a couple of years later during the recession, our company said, listen, the one thing that he asked Rachelle is that we take care of you. And what do you want to do? And I said, I want his job. And I know you're not going to give me the title, and I know you're not going to give me the pay, and I'm okay with that. I just want the opportunity to show you that I've learned enough in the last 2 years that I can keep doing this work in a different capacity. And they were silly enough to let me do it, Anna. Anyway, I think I might be slightly off topic.
I love this because this is one of those success stories you never hear come out of military spouse mouths, right? You hear these kinds of conversations happening about like where their career went, how they asked for what they wanted, and then were given the actual opportunity.
I took that opportunity and I ran with it, and I did all the right things in terms of working hard, being the first in the office, all the things that you're supposed to do, but sometimes maybe we don't or can't, especially because of our military spouse lifestyle. At that point, we didn't have kids, and my husband was working ridiculous hours. Anybody whose spouse has worked in DC knows what I'm talking about. Your life is not your own. And so I had a lot of time to be able to really devote to my own career. And after raising my hand and asking for what I wanted for a second time, which, oh, by the way, they flew me to our corporate office. I had to do one-on-one interviews with every C-suite executive at our organization at that time. CEO, CFO, CMO, all the C's. And I was little old me down here. I was a different C. I wasn't a C-suite executive. I was like a C executive. Not intimidating at all. Anyway, a couple of years later, it was like, hey, we need someone to take on this special project. Raise my hand. Then a year later, hey, you did that. What else can you do? And so I really put myself out there and came from a place of yes, and said yes to a lot of things. And my career was chug, 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 chug. It was going up. And then we had babies, sweet, sweet, sweet little babies that, as babies do, require a lot of time and attention. I loved being a mom. It was really hard for me to have kiddos. And so I love being pregnant in that space in our lives. But not long after the kids came and my husband was advancing in his career too, it became very clear to me, especially with deployments, with workups, with TDYs, with working crazy shifts. He was the middle of the night guy for many, many years, usually the first year to 2 years of everywhere we moved. We were 2 ships passing in the night. One baby became 2 babies, 2 kids under 2 in Hawaii. We're stationed in Hawaii in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I am barely keeping it together. And I really was the proverbial single mom during those 3 years. It was very hard professionally. And eventually what happened and what happens to so many active duty military spouses, whether they're employed or whether they are unemployed, but even underemployed, is my husband's career kept going like this, and mine really started to do this. And it wasn't because of anything my employer was doing or any limitations they were putting on me at all. It was me self-selecting out of promotions, me not raising my hand to say, I'll take on that special project, or I can move at the whim of the organization. I just wasn't in that phase. I couldn't be. He was gone. I was home, 2 kiddos, no family around. Everybody knows that. Everybody has lived this. They understand what I'm talking about. I think there were times where I was frustrated by that. And I was like, oh, I wish I saw jobs that I really wanted to take. There were promotions that I thought, oh, I'd be perfect for that. And I couldn't raise my hand. And not in a woe is me kind of way. I value the sacrifice that I made too professionally for the sake of country and for the sake of my husband's career. I believed very much in the work he was doing. I don't say that in any kind of victim way whatsoever. I did that graciously. And oh, by the way, during this period of time, at some point, I also was asked to take on the Adecco Group Military Alliance program, which is a program completely dedicated to advancing employment and education opportunities for the military community. And so that was a natural fit for me. And I have been really heavily involved in this space for probably the last 17 of my 20-year career at the Adecco Group. So I admit, you see the Adecco or the name of the Adecco Group, like I am the face of and have been for a really long time. But when my husband, after 20 years, said, Rachelle, we always said we're going to do this until it doesn't make sense anymore. And for various reasons, it maybe doesn't make as much sense as it used to. I think it's time to retire. I turned to him so fast. I said, the 3 words that I have heard from 1,000 military spouses over the last 17 years. Honey, it's mine. And he said, you go, girl. Yes, it is your turn. And I went back to my boss and I embodied what I embodied 18 years ago with my very first boss here, which was asking for what I want. And I said, boss, and she's an amazing boss. I said, I want to do more. Russ is retiring. We're going to move and we're going to be settled. And we're going to have the stability that we haven't had geographically for our family, for our kids. And I am ready to do more in this role. I want to go to the next level. And she said, I've been waiting for you to say this. I knew you had more gas in the tank. Let's go. And within 6 months, I was promoted into the job I have now, which has been and is a dream. And I love it. And that's really the impetus for me creating It's My Turn, is it draws from my own experience and the experience, again, of hundreds or thousands of spouses I've worked with over the years.
There's so much to unpack from this
I know.
story.
I told you, Anna, I'm a talker and I can't help myself. I love it so much.
I'm okay with that. You and I actually both happen to be those unicorns. We've discussed this before where
Yes.
you worked for the same company for 20 years. I had the opportunity to work for the same company for 16 different years, on and off. They would put me on an extended leave of absence. These things are unheard of almost within the military spouse employment section, where companies are willing to go to this length to retain a military spouse. And I also know how fortunate that is. So when you started to level out and you said you started self-selecting out of promotions and opportunities to move forward, and this came with kids, and this came with your spouse's career moving upward and the long deployments and all those things that play into having to take a step back. That's where I think all the other military spouses start to go, yes, that has been my experience. That has been my career. So I want to dive into that for just a little bit. When we talk about those issues, the root issues, the really core problems, we talk about unemployment, we talk about underemployment and all that stuff. But is there more? Is there something deeper, something bigger? Is there more where we're not really saying the words, but we all just know it or feel it as a military spouse community about what's going on in that space?
I don't know that there's necessarily something more. I think that from an employer perspective, there have been employers that have figured this out and figured out how to keep military spouses employed in remote kind of work environments where they do have continuity of employment. And returning to work has made that more difficult. I remember during COVID, I remember having a conversation with our heroes in April of 2020. And I said, this is going to be the best thing for the military spouse population because the playing field's going to finally be level in terms of where you live not being an issue, whether you're in the US and in the middle of nowhere where there's not a lot of job opportunities, or maybe even stationed overseas. That's not going to matter if everybody is working from home. What I didn't take into account was what actually happened was it made it that much more competitive for military spouses because everybody was forced to go home. And then when they returned to work, they liked it at home and were competing for those remote jobs. So it didn't quite level the playing field as much. After working with and coaching spouses over the year, whether you're an active duty spouse or a veteran spouse, that I find myself talking to them a lot about is really understanding the value that you bring, your worthiness as a whole human being, not having to feel like you are hustling for your worthiness, but really understanding that is, first of all, something innate that you have inside of you that you were born with. And you can't volunteer your way into worthiness. You can't work your way into worthiness. You are worthy because you are human, which maybe that sounds a little hippy dippy, but you'd be surprised how many don't feel that way. And I think some of that is because they don't always recognize, and this is the second part, the value that they bring and how to tell that or how to tell their story. And I don't mean necessarily like from a personal branding perspective, but my friend Elmina I love that she has flipped on its head the term soft skills and turned it into power skills, which I use that phrase all the time. Military spouses have a unique brilliance. They just don't know how to unleash it, and they don't recognize themselves as being uniquely brilliant. They look at their neighbors and they go, well, so what? I move every 1 to 3 years. So does the person to my right. So does the person to my left. When we are with each other, which is such a wonderful community to have, we see each other as different, but like a lot of the same struggles, the same challenges. And that we somehow go, that's not unique. That doesn't separate us, but it absolutely separates you from the rest of the population, first of all. So understanding that, believing that, and then knowing how to talk about it, being competent enough to be able to tell an employer, hey, yeah, I didn't get paid for the last 6 months or a year or 6 years, but here are all the skills that I've amassed, power skills that I've amassed during that time. The other part to that unique brilliance, Anna, I think sometimes I don't know if take for granted is the right word, but we think that when we are naturally competitive or we're naturally assertive or hardworking or friendly or fill in the blank characteristic, we think that's not very, again, brilliant or unique, but it is your genius. And we work so much on developing and focusing so much on skills that we don't have, which you should upskill, reskill, get current on technical stuff. But those power skills that are innate to you, that again, that's what separates you from the herd. Teaching spouses to really hone in on that. I think sometimes they miss the mark and we miss the mark.
First, I adore the term power skills versus soft skills. Like, I think that is a brilliant way to rephrase what those things are for us. Second, I 100% agree with you that within our community, we don't feel unique. And because we live within that community almost exclusively for sometimes decades, we forget how special we really are when it comes to some of those, we call them resilience skills or adaptability skills, those kinds of things that as a military spouse, you just do day after day, PCS move after PCS move, TDY after TDY, like you just do it, right? What you don't recognize is that in the civilian world, they aren't having to do those same kinds of things or employ those same skills with the frequency that you are as a military spouse. And then I don't know if I'm on 3 or 4 or 2 or wherever number we're at now, I would say, that I love strengths conversations and those innate talents that people have.
Yes.
As a Clifton strengths coach, I so firmly believe in that as well.
Yeah.
When you can really focus on those things that you're just really, really good at, and you don't focus on trying to get better at those weak spots, but instead you use what you're great at to support those
Yes.
areas,
Yes.
you are unstoppable.
That's
And
right.
I think sometimes as military spouses, we just don't take, I don't know if it's the time. We don't take the time, or we're so focused on making sure everyone else is okay, that our families are where they need to be, that our kids have what they need, that the dog has what they need, that our spouse has what they need, that we are in last place again. And so,
true.
yeah.
Let me add on to that for a second, because I think I may have maybe missed answering that question more specifically as it pertains to veteran military spouses, and what you're saying is landing. One of the things that we want to do through It's My Turn is really encourage veteran military spouses to pursue ambition purposefully. So you asked about one of the things that's missing, or maybe that we don't do or we haven't done. And I think that this comment, I find it to be very true with the veteran population. And it's the very first stage of It's My Turn, and that's self-discovery and spending the time doing exactly what you just said, figuring out and better aligning what's in our heart and our head. So looking at what motivates us, what are our values, what are our strengths, what are we interested in, taking the time to sit and take inventory of that. We just did that a couple of weeks ago in our first session with It's My Turn, and the number of participants that said, wow, what's sticking out to me is that what motivates me today at 47 is not what motivated me 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So it's also a continual process that you should be doing this. It's easy to get into a habit of taking the quick job, especially when we're active duty, to say our family needs that second income. Let me take the job that's available. And so we end up with these high underemployment rates for the sake of getting an income. And I don't mean that lightly whatsoever. And I do believe there's dignity in all work. Let me just put that out there too. And sometimes we feel like we don't have this space or grace to do that deep dive internally on ourselves and do that self-discovery. That's why it was so important to me that we spend so much time doing it in our 12-week program, because we don't always give ourselves permission to do that, or we don't think it's necessary. We think we know ourselves, and then we spend a little bit of time with ourselves and we're like, ooh, there's all these aha moments that you're having with yourself or in community in a program like ours. Yes, self-discovery, very, very important. I always say job searching is soul searching or career searching is soul searching. We go out there and apply to 100 jobs and we're exhausted and we're like, but we feel like we did something. And you did, but you did it wrong. Do you know what I mean? If you're applying for 100 jobs in a day, you just wasted a day. There's a much better way to do it. I know that's another topic, but start with the self-discovery piece.
Yes. Okay. Yes. The self-discovery is huge. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. There's a lot of organizations right now starting to turn their focus and to make that more of a priority. We haven't seen that a lot in the past decade, I would say. I feel like just the last couple of years, you start to see that self-assessment, that self-awareness, that well-being side of things being added as a component now to so many things that not only just deal with transition, but career, social, community, like all those finances, even really stopping and saying, I remember having a conversation with a finance expert and they said, what is your relationship with money? And when you stop and think about it in that way, that's a well-being thing. That's not about saving, spending, and investing necessarily. It's about that personal assessment of how do I feel when I get around money? Does it cause me anxiety or stress? The same thing goes with like career conversations.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you get in this space?
Yes, I would say as it's specific to careers, I agree with you that can be used. That mindset is important for all aspects of life. But when you look at specifically transitioning from the military, whether you're the active duty service member transitioning or you're the spouse, inherently, I think we know this and we don't maybe understand the depths of it. The identity shift and change and the whole like psychology of that part of your transition, you have to give space to work through that. Again, both for the service member and the military spouse. Your family roles are going to look differently. Now you've got a partner that's there all the time, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You've got to adjust to that. You've got to adjust to your own identity as a spouse, saying, okay, I'm no longer maybe part of the active duty military spouse population. What might that look like for me? Or what does it look like now? How do I still find my people when I'm not living on base anymore, or I'm not as tied to the community as I once was, especially if you're not living in a military town anymore? That's huge. It's equally huge for the service member going through that same identity transition. For 10 years, I managed our sponsorship of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And so we helped Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes with this very similar, and it is a similar psychology of transition and figuring out who am I outside of sport and how does that impact the not just career exploration and the career that I'm going to explore, but how I show up in the world.
Yeah.
It's really, really important work. I just offer this teeny tiny bit of vulnerability. Having been in this space for so long, I felt like I very much fully prepared my husband for transition, and he did really well. I'm like, if we were going to grade ourselves, we get an A. Like I always want an A in everything I do. And I'm like, hey, you get an A. I did not get an A when it came to anticipating the needs of my children, which I know is not what we're talking about in a completely different topic. But for spouses that are watching or listening, and you are about to be in that phase of transition, really thinking about and finding resources that might help your children. I wish if I'd known what I know today, 2.5 years ago, would have probably been a different experience for my family. It was hard.
So first of all, big virtual hug right here from me to you, because I get that 100%. And that's why MilSpouse Transition even exists today, right? Is hearing stories like this about, I wish I had known. I wish somebody had told me. And so frequently I hear spouses say, oh, I'm not going to have a problem with that. And I feel like the old grandma, like sitting there smiling, knowing, shaking my head and going, okay,
good luck with that.
Yeah. If you ever feel like you need something, just, you know where I'm at, right? Like just that's offering that space, because you don't know until it happens. You don't know how it's going to feel until you're in that situation. I very much thought that we had it down. I did not get an A in any of the categories. Like it was a disaster. But I partly blame the fact that we transitioned during COVID as part of the reason why there was no A's at all in the world in existence at that point for transition.
Oh yeah. One thing I do say to people that say, "Oh, we're good. We're going to be fine." transition's mission. It just recognizing and admitting to yourself life, and maybe they are going to be, but I think the other thing is that life is full of transitions, and you have been transitioning at every stage throughout your career in the military. And here's the big difference, because whether it's a TDY, whether it's a PCS, whether it's a deployment, the difference is service members are walked through every step of that journey. Every move they make, their hand is held. Somebody is saying, sign here, check a box here, go get this appointment, show up on this day at this time. And spouses are just left to figure it out on our own. So we're like, good luck, Godspeed, and see you on the other side.
Yes. Wing it. Fly, little bird. Figure it all out.
Yes.
Bird. Hopefully you don't go crashing.
Yes, which is why what you're doing is so important, Anna, because you're giving a space and a place for people to be able to talk about it and learn from each other.
I'm trying. And like I said, that's what Spouse Transition is all about, is just to help those spouses that do find themselves in that struggle. Just there's a place to go, right? There is a place to go. And if I don't have the resource on there yet, it's coming. This is a labor of love, and I do it in all my spare time. And I just see such a need for it. It's such a huge gap where, yes, we've been winging it for a century at this point. Honestly, when you start to think about it, we have been winging it for a century, but there is a better way, and it does not have to be so hard. And if I can make it just a tiny bit easier for one spouse, that's what I want to do. And that's what I love. Okay, we're going to turn this back and we're going to say, that's what I love about your program, the It's My Turn program. Tell us a little bit about It's My Turn and how it specifically addresses that career transition need for veteran spouses, and what's different about it than every other career program out there.
So a couple things. So this is super fun picture, right? Last year, actually end of 2023, I applied to be a scholar with the Stand and Veteran Leadership Program at the Bush Institute. It's a program I had been eyeing for several years, and it just wasn't the right time. And that's another thing I tell military spouses is sometimes you might feel like it's my turn, but is it the right time? And this was the right time for me to apply and to participate. I was so fortunate and grateful to be selected last year. Went through a 5-month leadership program with very like-minded, like-hearted veterans, spouses, and allies, very strong advocates in the military community space where we learned and loved together. It was also an opportunity for me to develop It's My Turn, which is what you see there, me on the stage presenting my final project back in October. And what It's My Turn really does or allows for is space for veteran military spouses. You do have to be a veteran military spouse, so either separated or retired from active duty at least one day to apply. It is a 12-week virtual career transition program. So we're focusing mostly on career exploration throughout the 12-week program. We talked earlier about focusing heavily in the beginning on self-discovery. So doing all of the work that you need to do, aligning your values so that you are pursuing ambition with purpose. We go through and after doing some assessments, explore potential careers that would align with your values and your motivators, what you're good at and what you're interested in. And then we look at, okay, we've outlined 2 or 3 possible career paths that we could take. Now, what skills do I need and what's missing? This is one thing that makes our program different. In order for me to pursue that career, what skills do I need to level up or be reskilled in order to pursue that? So we've got several different ways that we're going to be helping spouses create a plan to close those skills gaps. I'm real excited about that. And then we will walk through all of the check-off lists in terms of when you get to a place where you're working on your skills at the same time that you're doing this, by the way, but all the things that you need to actually pursue a job, from honing an elevator speech, networking, leveraging AI. Oh, actually, we have a really cool AI tool. That's the other thing that makes us unique, where we are doing assessments, leveraging Career Canvas, an AI tool that LHH or Lee Hecht Harrison, my sister company, has developed. We are making sure that you've got your resume intact, like all the checklist kinds of things we're covering throughout the program. And then ultimately what we are hoping for is that we will help you land your next role. So whether it's help by somebody within our organization, or we're connecting you to our network and helping you job search in 2025, and then landing that job. Whether or not that will all happen like by the end of the 12 weeks, it's a process. So it's going to take some people longer than others. But I think the full 360 version of the program is not really currently being offered. There are some other companies that are doing some really great work with veteran military spouses or transitioning spouses in that self-discovery phase, but haven't quite developed curriculum around offering skills training, career exploration, skills training, actually identifying a job. It's ambitious. I love to do ambitious things. I don't play small ball. Let's do it. We're all in on this. The other thing is when I was exploring this, I always want to be innovating programs and opportunities that don't currently exist in the space. And you mentioned this, I think, in the intro or earlier, that this really is a need. And when we initially launched the application, the amount of positive feedback that I got from the community saying, oh my gosh, I wish this was available to me when I was getting out, or I love the name. I love the branding. The branding is strong. All of it has been so affirming, Anna. And so I know that we're on the right track. We're going to continue to evolve this too. We talk a lot about open feedback and making changes so that future iterations, cohort 2 and cohort 3 and cohort 4, benefit from the lessons we learned in cohort 1, where we keep building it as we go. And I'm feel very privileged and excited to be offering this to the veteran military spouse community. So if you are interested in being a future participant, I want to encourage you definitely to reach out to me and we can talk about what that looks like. We're going to open it back up in August for cohort 2, and we take about 25 participants per cohort. That kind of lends itself nicely to a group virtual workshop environment. We've got accountability partners in here, Anna. Like, community is huge for me when I build programs like this. It's forced fun. We send gratitude notes to each other. I'm all about expressing delight and living life that way anyway. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
When I heard about this program, I was one of those people going, oh my gosh, finally, something that really is like you don't have to piecemeal it together, which is what I ended up doing during the end when I knew we were getting ready to transition. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I had just left my job before our last PCS move because we were going to Africa. And I knew that when I got back, it was going to be a different season for me when it came to employment. And so it was through a mentor and then conversations with this organization and conversations with that organization and different things that they offered that I started to explore my way through where do I want to go now? And so I love that you have this kind of just one space. And one of the things I remember you saying in a different conversation, I heard you talking, I stalk Rachelle a little bit. So if she's on something, I'm watching it. Anyway, one of the things you said in one of these other conversations was that this is not I might be looking for a job, so I should apply here. This is for that military spouse that is like, 30 seconds after their spouse says, I might want to retire, is going, it is my turn and I am ready and I want this.
Oh, that's I'm so glad you said that, Anna. Yes, you were absolutely right. If you are looking for a job, we are a workforce development company. We've got jobs. So if you're just looking for the end game as a job, we got you. I'll connect you to a recruiter anytime, any day. This is really you saying, I am ready to do the hard work and introspective work of looking within myself and spending some time with myself. You've got to reflect. If not, we eject you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to say reflect or eject. That sounds awful. No, I don't mean it. But you really do need to do this work. One thing I'll say is that a lot of spouses have come to me saying, I struggle with confidence. And confidence, I think, requires 3 things. It first requires permission. You need to allow yourself to be in a headspace to pursue it. It requires community. It was a non-negotiable that we offered this program in a group environment. You do get 2 one-on-one sessions with a career coach in addition to a career coach leading the weekly virtual sessions, but learning in community and being supported by community, there's nothing better. I've run too many upskilling and reskilling programs to know our success rates are way higher when we do it together than we do it when we give. And I think specifically the spouse community, here's access, good luck. No. You're going to be supported fully. And then the third thing is curiosity. If you adopt the mindset that life is, rather than it be about having the right answers all the time, but instead asking the right questions. If you believe that, this is the program for you. You're going to ask more questions probably than you get answers. And I do think by the end, we are going to see confidence rates just skyrocket with all 25 of the spouses that are involved this year.
I love that's your end goal or one of your end goals. It's not just about putting them in a profession they're excited about it, that confidence level and being able to take ownership of who they are and really how amazing they are as a military spouse, but also as an individual, as a career professional, as a parent, like whatever those titles that we hold, owning all of them and moving forward. And that to me, it makes me almost a little emotional because that is really where we fall flat in so many areas of transition, both for the veteran and the military spouse and the military children, is finding and giving the resources where people can take all those bits and pieces that they've left all over the world at all the different duty stations with all the different people that they've met and doing all the different roles that they've had during that time frame and gathering them all together and being able to create it. This is who I am understanding. This is my value and this is where I can give back. And this is all the things that I offer to the world. But also this is what I want and need to move forward with joy and happiness and confidence and excitement for this next step. So I just feel like this is such an amazing program. Let's pull up your contact slide and tell people where to come find you if they want to know more about this August cohort and what's going on.
So a great way to connect with me directly is through LinkedIn. So please feel free to message me, connect with me on LinkedIn and then message me and we can set up a time to chat. I also want to encourage your viewers and listeners to follow the Adecco Group US Foundation across all of our social media platforms.
We will make sure and include all of these links, all the things that are pertinent to what you would need to know in order to access the program and to ask questions from Rachelle in our show notes. So if you just head to the show notes when this is aired, it will give you links to all of these places directly. So you don't have to go searching for anything. Rachelle, thank you so much for being here with me today. If you were going to give one piece of advice to a veteran spouse or a spouse facing the veteran lifestyle in the next few months, what advice would you give them as a fellow veteran spouse?
I would say give yourself permission to be the main character in your life. And I don't mean that in the way that our teenage daughters want to be the main character in all of our lives, but be the main character of your own life and give your permission. If you don't know what that looks like, give yourself permission to figure it out because what you're not changing, you're choosing.
I love that piece of advice. Rachelle, thank you so much for being here with us today. There's 3 things I always ask my audience to do. If you're not connected with me, when you go find Rachelle on LinkedIn, come and connect with me as well. The second one is check out the show notes and make sure you go and visit all those places and like, subscribe, follow, all the things. And then the third thing is to join my email list, which will also be in the show notes because I'll tell you what's going to happen when this Adecco Group, It's My Turn August cohort opens up. That's going to be pushed out through my email list. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Rachelle, thank you again for all your wise words and just the eloquence in which you speak to this career conversation. And to everyone else out there, I hope you have a wonderful day and join us for our next Mil Spouse Transition Conversation.